And Hernan, we're live. How are you doing today?
Great. So happy to be here, Berk.
Awesome. It's a pleasure having you. Let's start with like a brief summary of like how you got here, how you became a venture capitalist, what your story has been so far.
Sure. I was born and raised in Argentina, started in technology very young, like you did. I, I worked in some early stage startups from the days in which there were almost no venture capitalists in Latin America. Literally, there were none, basically. Um, After some years, I decided I wanted to really get to meet VCs, which sound very mystical at the time. So the way I did that is I applied for a business school in the US. I ended up being accepted in Berkeley. I moved to California. I got involved in everything venture capital. I joined. I yeah. I launched two startups in the US. One I got lucky and was acquired. Then I was part of another large startup in the US. And at some point, I decided I wanted to bring part of what I learned during my journey to South America because now there are VCs here in the region. There are still very few, and it's still kind of an obscure area for people that are not connected with venture capitalists or experienced entrepreneurs, how you go about raising money. Yeah, capital is needed. And I think this is a good way to have an impact in the region.
Absolutely. So you're a young founder, you're looking to, ahead at your life and you say, I want to be an entrepreneur, I want to get a bit more exposure to venture capital. You get into Berkeley, you move to the US. You're now in California, the dream state. You've got all these opportunities around you. What did you mentioned? You built a startup that was acquired. What was that startup? What did you guys do?
Yeah, it was an ad network. It sounds very old school, right? We are competing with AdSense, if you want. Like it was an ad network targeting the US Hispanic population. And we had what you would now call like machine learning. At the time, it was big data, basically crunching um, the the sites, the information from the navigation from the different users to determine whether they were Hispanic dominant or Spanish or bilinguals, so we could target in a much more accurate way. So that's what we did. It was fun for some time, and we got acquired by Entravision, which is a public corporation that at the time owned a bunch of TV and radio stations, and they didn't know much about digital, and that's why they acquired us.
That's really interesting. I want to ask you. A lot of the founders I speak to today, they're overwhelmed by the amount of ideas they have. I mean, just the amount of industries they could be in, the amount of stuff they could be building. Now, you built two startups. You've been a part of early stage startups. You've also worked in startups. And now you're a venture capitalist, so I'm sure you help a lot of founders navigate their ideas and build them up and evolve them and pivot when they need to. If you're a founder today, how would you come up with ideas that people want? How would you go about? Do you have like any frameworks for like finding problems and evaluating them, testing them?
No, not really. Like it depends on its personality and background. Like I'm very divergent. I usually have a bunch of ideas. Like it's not really that important. Like the number of ideas you have. It's about validation, and it's about being methodical in the way you approach that. Like we can talk for hours about whether this is a good or a bad idea, but until you go to market and talk with like potential customers or users, you don't know, right? So to me, like it's very scary when I see founders that have way too many ideas. I rather meet a founding team that has something they want to really learn, that they are obsessed with getting like super deep into how to build this product for this segment of people. And even if the segment is too narrow, that's perfect. At the beginning, you want to have what you're trying to do is to identify a very homogenic segment of users that have a shared point that is like a big point, not something that is nice to have, something that they're really willing to pay, even though your crappy product is still lacking a bunch of the functionality that they will eventually need, and you want to be close to them and to listen to them. So your ideas are in some ways irrelevant, right? The market is what determines the success of your startup and your ability to listen to the market and to adjust.
You mentioned you prefer working with teams that are really obsessed about serving one particular segment, as narrow as it may be. They just need to find some that people really, really want. I think that's like the Y Combinator approach as well, of like the 100 real fans. Now, you were able to find that with your startups. If you were a young founder today getting started and you're thinking, who could I serve? Who could I, how could I find those 100 true fans? How would you do that? What kind of path would you take?
And, again, there's no like silver bullet for any of these, right? But I I think building a company, it's committing to a 5 to 10 year time frame of doing pretty much the same thing at different stages. So you need to start with in a place that you feel like strong and really passionate about, and make sure that the motivation is not like getting rich, because most founders do not get rich, and that has very like short legs. Eventually, when you're 3 years 4 years into that and you're still not rich and you're still being underpaid, you're going to lose motivation. So make sure that you're building something because you really want to try to fix that problem, right? um, and starting from within, in a way, I would see, okay, what are my expertise, values, and motivations that I can take to the market that I feel interested in getting to know, right? Let's say you have an idea about, I don't know, a product for politicians. I would never build something for a politician. I don't care about politics. I don't like politicians, generally speaking, right? So why would you put yourself in a situation in which you are setting yourself for failure or deception?
Absolutely. Now, when you were in your late teens, or your early 20s, you decided to move to the U.S. because you thought it was the way you would get access to opportunities.
Yeah.
If you're an Argentinian person, a young person today, you're 19, 18, 19, 20 years old, or maybe you're from anywhere else in the world, really. You could be from, Brazil or Asia, Korea, Japan. Should you still, let's say, like, you want to be a startup founder, that you want to be successful, you want to exit a company, should you still go to San Francisco or a place like California? Should you still aspire to move to a place like the US? Is that still like the golden land of opportunities?
It's clearly still the most active like ecosystem in the world, and it will continue to be like that for many years. It's about playing to win, right? For instance, let me connect this with some of what we were talking earlier. Like I mentioned, my startup was about targeting the US Hispanic population. Many times clients were asking, can you do the same for Portuguese speaking population? Can you do the same for Asian? And we got tempted. And actually we, at some point we saw like Asian audiences. It was a really bad idea, stupid idea. We were set for Spanish speaking. Our team was bilingual between Spanish. We didn't speak any Chinese or Korean, any like Asian languages. It was a terrible bad idea. So you need to set yourself for success, right? If you are going to the Silicon Valley and you want to compete with the average like white American from Stanford, Berkeley, and whatever, you are setting yourself at a disadvantage. If you are going there with a story about, yeah, I'm Argentinian, I noticed that in the US there are, I don't know, these type of businesses that are not very common in South America. I want to bridge the gap. I want to connect with founders and VCs that have experience in that and bring it to build a company here. That may make sense. The other thing is that, yeah, valuations are higher. Raising money is in some ways easier in the Silicon Valley, but the cost of living, it's 5x at least what you will get in South America. So you can raise a 250,000 in Argentina and build a small army of engineers and UX people, and that's an advantage. If you are from an emerging market that has a cost advantage and you are not using that to your uh, to your convenience, I think you are leaving money on the table, right? Um, so you have to have very good reasons why you want to do that, right? And it should not be ego. Everyone wants to say I raised from this or that. Silicon Valley big name VC, and that's great, but that's not necessarily good for building a business. It may be good for building your reputation or to showing off to your classmates. But hopefully there are some deeper and more meaningful reasons to move there, right?
Absolutely. I think I'd actually say a few of my friends and I, we've considered South America quite strongly. You know, it's obviously your dollar goes way further in South America, but also, you know, so recent years, Argentina has been doing really well. Like we've all seen the president; he's done an excellent job. So yeah, it's an
Yes.
exciting region.
And let me take you as an example. Like you're a young entrepreneur, you had your exits, you built stuff in the past. That's fantastic. In California, there are hundreds of thousands like you. Move to Argentina, and then you are the guy that had exits. I'm not sure if your exit was in the US. It's the same, but that has operated and built things internationally. And now it's in Argentina. Suddenly, you're attracting more attention. You have a story. You are not the average Joe in Argentina talking to VCs. You are different. So play to your advantages.
That's actually I hadn't thought about it that way. Do you think that that would also make the process of like recruiting? Because I know like for founders, finding A plus talent, the most talented in the world and everything is really important. Do you think that that makes that part easier as well? If you can go to Argentina and say, "Hey, look, I'm an international entrepreneur. I've done this. If you work for me, you're going to work for the best in the country."
Yeah,
You think that's
absolutely. Absolutely. You are the shiny object. Like the company I exit, we had all our team in Argentina, right? And yeah, there were not a lot of like US based startup that had raised money in Argentina. So the option of working for a cool startup was what's more scarce, right? If you are in San Francisco, probably there are three or four other competitors around the block that will try to poke and steal your best engineers. Here you are more protected.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's maybe time to look for a flights ticket to Buenos Aires, take a trip over there. That's awesome. And then I want to talk to you about fundraising for the first startup. So you mentioned you go to Berkeley, you're now trying to work on these different ideas. You find this thing for Spanish speakers in the US. How did you then like fundraise? I mean, you're early in your like you're very early in your journey. You probably have no idea. How did you navigate the very confusing process?
Yeah. So I'm assuming we're talking like super early stage, like
Yeah, like
post friends and family, or do you want to talk about friends and
let's
family?
say like post friends and family, you've arrived, you've done your pre-seed, your post friends and family. Now you're thinking, we need more capital. Where
Yeah.
do you go from there?
Yeah. So there are accelerators and pre-accelerators now. That's something new. There were none of those before. Those are like good options, and the process is easy in the way that it's very structured. So you just look the 500s and the Figmas, and there are a lot of different accelerators in each region. You just follow the step. But if you're talking with early stage VCs, like pre-seed and seed VCs, it's I would say there are like two paths or maybe three. Like one is the seasoned entrepreneur that has maybe had a small exit or at least experienced in one or two startups before. Then that puts you like on a fast track for most VCs, right? Then the guy with all the medals from I don't know I did my MBA at Stanford. Some people will really like that. So those guys have it easier, right? Let's talk about the guys that do not have that, like the super smart guy, talented, very scrappy, that haven't proved themselves yet, right? It's all about the story, right? You need to be able to communicate, and the story and what some people call the problem founder fit. Why are you gonna be the one that's gonna fix this? Because connecting with the ideas conversation at the beginning, the ideas and the problems are most times obvious. It's just that no one is brave enough to try to fix them, or there are people are trying and they're failing. So from a VC standpoint, what we need to decide is, where is this guy going to be the one that's going to fix this problem? So what's your connection? What's your your secret sauce? Put it in simple ways, like, why are you better than others? What resource do you have? Like, are you an expert because you've been researching this problem for years, or do you know certain people that can make the introductions to break into a really hard to get industry, right? Or, I know you are extremely good at hiring, and you can hire people in markets in which you have a huge cost advantage, right? Try to communicate that and a reasonable plan, right? And make sure that you understand what a very early stage startup is, which I like. Yeah, I think it's Steve Blank's definition that I'm going to steal from a moment. And he says something along the lines of, a startup is a temporary organization, right? uh, Looking for a repeatable and scalable business model. So in a way, it's an organization set for learning. And you learn more the more focus you have, right? Because if you are targeting 10 different industries and you receive positive and negative reply from different customers, you know nothing. But if you get 100 responses from the same industry, you may learn that no one wants your product in that industry. Fine, then you can pivot to a different industry. You can adjust your product to that same customer. But make sure that you communicate that you understand what the game is, and the game is learning and being like open-minded, and setting yourself for success, which means playing to your strengths.
So you mentioned the story part. I'm assuming that story looked some like, look, I'm a Spanish speaker that moved to the US. I understand the segment very well because I am in the segment. I can hire, if you fund me, I can hire from Argentina, my home country, which means our dollars go way further in terms of talent. And so we can build this. We understand their pain points in all these different ways. Was that kind of like how you structured your story? What did your story specifically look like when you were talking to these investors?
Yeah. So that was my story for Mr. Pink. So right now, for the last couple of years, I've been working as a venture capitalist at Mr. Pink. I'm a solo GP, which means that I was like a new founder in some way. We are called emerging managers, and that's the CPs, the founders of the first fund, or even a second fund. You can still be considered an emerging manager. So my pitch to European and US investors, which are around like half of my LP base, my investor base, was exactly that. Like, I know startup here. There are not a lot of like VCs operating in South America. These guys can go a long way with less money, so it's more capital efficient. And I don't have a lot of competition. If I were to start a new fund in San Francisco, there's not a lot I can say to my advantage. Here, I'm the guy that exits the company in the US, that has connections with the Silicon Valley, right? And connections in South America. And investing here, I'm in culture. I have a strong network, and I connect to capital and to our investors in the US. So that's the story. It's very easy to digest. So the stories need to be simple, right? And if you can, appeal to emotions, because the guy on the other side of the table, or the screen, right, as it may the case be, it's a human being. Even if he's an investor, a VC, or whatever, try to connect with that person and make sure that they believe what you are saying, and that you are credible, and that you have a coherent story and rationale of why you are in this point in time asking for money to that person in particular.
Absolutely. I want to ask you about the kind of idea of pivot versus persist. So a lot of folks I've
Mm.
spoken to in the past, they say, a good entrepreneur, they know how to fail when it's time and they know how to quit something as much as they know when it's time to persist. Now you've built startups. You now, I'm sure when you're managing your portfolio at Mr. Pink and you're looking over all the startups and you're coaching them and you're helping them out, obviously that question comes up a lot. Like, should we persist here or should we maybe change things up and should we maybe pivot? I know it's highly contextual, so I know it's very difficult to come up with a silver bullet or general answer. But what are some maybe indicators that you should be paying attention to that suggest it is time you should pivot and not be stubborn?
Yeah. So I'm going to connect that with the learning speed I referred before. So some entrepreneurs are like just intuitive beasts, right? They have a strong ability to use their intuition beside what average humans can, right? But that's not something you can train, right? But we have something called statistics, right? And you can use that to as a way to guide your decision making. And that's why you need a homogeneous group of customers or industries, users. And that's why focus is so important, right? Because if you focus very deeply on a small segment, you can get to statistical significance faster than if you're just like throwing like bullets to anything that moves with the wallet, right? So in a way, try to get your like quantitative information and make sure that you're talking about homogenic groups and you're not mixing things up, and then like use your intuition, because in the end of the day, uh, you just need to follow your guts most of the time, because yeah, you can wait 5 years to get perfect information, but you have a runway of 1 or 2 years. So you're going to be dead before you can collect all the data. So, but at least you need to see how the data is trending, right? If you are starting to notice that, okay, I don't know, we are not getting good traction in the financial industry, but retail seems to be moving well. Okay, maybe just allocate more resources to that industry before you totally forget about the financial industry, and see how it goes. Like A/B, the concept of A/B testing, it's the same. You need to A/B test your ideas and all your hypotheses, right? In the end, it's about learning and validating those hypotheses that you have.
Absolutely. Since you've been a founder and you talked about following your gut, and that segues perfectly into my next question. I'm sure you know even better than I do. It's building a startup is an emotional journey. It's a roller coaster, and everybody jokes about and they'll post memes. One day you're like you're on top of the world, the other day you've hit rock bottom, and it's very difficult. Like just emotionally, it takes a toll. How did
Yes.
when you were building these startups and you're going through that emotional journey, you're going through the we're on top of the world and we've hit rock bottom parts. How did you keep yourself leveled? I've heard a lot of people say the best entrepreneurs are the ones who can be somewhat unemotional, who aren't, who don't act as emotionally. How did you go about managing your emotions and kind of keep them at bay and just be patient even when things, were quite rough, especially earlier stages of building a startup?
Yeah, we are emotional beings. Like I know the old school people might say, yeah, don't be so emotional. We are emotional. There's nothing you can do about that. I think self inquiry and trying to understand how your mind works and your body works is it's key here, right? In my case, I've been practicing meditation for maybe 20 years. um, but do something that can do something to learn about yourself, right? And and recognize those emotions. For instance, I'm intuitive and I'm emotional. So when I need to make an important decision, I usually don't do that on the spot. I may feel strongly that I'm gonna do this, but prevent myself from acting at the moment, and let it rest and maybe take it again at the next day. So learn what tricks work for you, right? And do not try to fight who you are. The human change is possible, but some things are like so heavily wired in our brains and in our personal history that it just takes years. So you can't just kick yourself for saying, hey, I shouldn't be so emotional about this or that. Like that's not something you can like rationally change. And and when people give that kind of ill advice, they are just generating more frustration and suffering in the person receiving it. But understand how you work, how you like to operate with others, how you like to think and decide. And there are many different ways to do those things. Find what works for you, like be unique. We are all like different, and that's fine. Again, they play to your advantages. Like you are the way you are, just embrace it and do the best you can with what you have.
Absolutely. Last question I want to ask you is, before we started recording, you were talking about the cultural difference between
Yeah.
people and venture capitalists even in different countries. So you mentioned Argentina, people are, very, they think collectively a little more. It's more about us and we than I. And then America, obviously, we're very individualistic. People are very, a lot more self-centered, at least. If you're a founder doing international business and you're working with people across continents, which is now becoming increasingly the case, a lot of startup founders are starting to hire internationally. So even if they're based in the US, they're hiring folks in Buenos Aires, Argentina and Brazil and all these different places. You've been international. How do you navigate those cultural challenges? How do you, one, learn about the culture so you don't, humiliate yourself and you don't embarrass yourself in the middle of people? And then two is like, how do you go about, interacting with those different people?
Yeah, it's a really good question and hard to answer because you don't know what you don't know, right? You may think that what you're doing is properly fine in certain context, and it's not, right? Um, so try to look for people maybe that can bridge those cultures together and validate with them. Like my co-founder at network, he was American. He is American, right? So many times I was checking with him, saying, "Hey, I got this email from the client or whoever, and it sounds very aggressive to me." And he was, "No, no, no, that's fine." He's just been like super straightforward because Americans are like very straightforward, right? Cut to the chase, and it's different. Like Latinos are more like rambling around, and we may get like 10 minutes late to a meeting and don't even apologize, and that's fine. And someone may get really pissed off at that, right? Like Sherman, just to take the typical example of people that really value punctuality. But you can't generalize. Like I really value punctuality myself. It's something I changed many years ago because it's about respecting their person time. Um, so do your research, right? And when in doubt, just ask. Just I remember this is very funny. Uh, this happened to me in business school. We were doing like a case study. It was a situation about someone fixing, trying to fix an issue at work, and my suggestion was I wanted to say invite this person over for lunch and just talk over. And instead of lunch, I said dinner, and everyone laughed because invite someone for dinner, and it was a male female situation, and in that context it sounded like a date, right? For in part it was just like me like mixing up words, but in the context of American culture it sounded like totally awkward. So I think it's just give yourself a break, laugh of yourself if something like that happened, and if you're not sure, just say, "Hey, is it okay if we do this?" Or just clarify. Actually, clarifying it's always a great great advice, even within culture and language. If you think someone is being aggressive, you can just instead of assuming, just say, "Hey, sorry, Berg. Are you mad at me? Yeah, what I'm saying is upsetting you because I feel like this is bothering you." And you may say, "No, I apologize. I just had a really bad day. It's not you." And problem solved. So check before assuming.
There we go. Awesome. Well, those are it for all the questions I've got. Is there anything that you'd particularly like to talk about? Any lessons you've learned? Any piece of advice? Anything that you'd like to add before we go?
Yeah, maybe quick comment about like and good thing is the younger generations are embracing this, understanding this. Like I think the stereotype of the founder that is smart ass, that has no fear and no emotions, and and works like an infinite amount of hours per week, that's old school. That has to die. And I think a lot of VCs are understanding that, and they do not expect that from all the founders. And just don't risk your health and mental health or physical health to a startup, because even if the startup is successful, which most likely it will not be, you will be with yourself until the day you die, right? So even if you see exit the company, fine, but what's the point if it costs your happiness, it costs your friendships or your marriage or whatever it is, right? And by all means, most of the startups do not get acquired. So in the end, what are you risking for something that most likely will not succeed? So make sure that you keep yourself happy, that you enjoy the ride. You are not just doing this for the final outcome, because you need to be fair and understand that that outcome most likely um, won't get there, right? So make sure that you enjoy what you're doing, that there won't be any regrets, and just enjoy it. It's a fantastic way of life, if you can handle it, and if you are doing it for the right reasons. If you want to make a lot of money, just be a banker, right? Do something else. Become a lawyer in New York. Don't be an entrepreneur.
I do want to ask you one follow up, if
Sure.
I may. You mentioned this whole idea of like working yourself until you're completely exhausted and burned out. That's becoming old school, and people are understanding the idea of being more balanced and taking the time to go have friends and go do all this kind of stuff. Now, obviously, you're now a venture capitalist. You're looking over a bunch of portfolio companies, and sometimes VCs are kind of a little infamous for like pushing founders until the very edge. How do you recommend early stage founders structure their day and their routines? Like, obviously, there's like the psychotic people who are like, work 18 hours a day, work 16 hours a day, just all you do is work. How do you recommend the early stage founder like structures their day?
Definitely try to do like something good for yourself every day, and if you can, just do this like very early in the morning. Like I'm talking meditation or sport, or go to the gym or go for a walk. Uh, Give yourself that time, because creativity is so important, and you can like crunch creativity. Creativity happens when your mind and body are relaxed. So make sure that you have time for that, and that you are like getting people on board, like partners and investors that understand that. um, I remember one angel investment I did many years ago. I was talking with this guy, and he was like, yeah, I got married like 2 months ago, and I hadn't gone on a honeymoon. I was like, that's stupid. You got married, you go and enjoy it. Like, if your company is so delicate that you can't take like a week off, then you're a very weak founder. Yeah,
Interesting. I know we're supposed to end it, but I just have one more follow up because this
sure.
topic
Go
is
for it.
is absolutely really interesting to me. In terms of like you mentioned your startup must be very delicate, like, and you're actually not doing that well as a founder if you can't like leave for a week and things are not in place and everything's burned up in chaos. What does a realistic workday look like on it? Now obviously there are sprints and there are times where you have to overwork
Sure.
yourself, but some people have this expectation of like, I just have to be working 12 hours a day for 10 years, and then I might, people brag about this on social media all the time. You see some
Yeah,
exited founders and they'll say, I was in the office for 7 days a week, 12 hours a day for 10 years.
that was like the Elon Musk's say. That was Bill Gates, even like fantastic entrepreneurs, obviously, and much smarter than me. But you need to look at things in culture. I don't think like the Gen Z or the younger generation, they were not gonna go with that, and that's fine. That's a fantastic progress. I think 8-10 hours max. It's a reasonable amount. Of course, there are sprints. Like we got hacked by Asian hackers when we were running the ad network. All the nodes were falling. Of course, you just get it done, whatever it takes. But it has to be balanced. It has to be balanced. Um, and creating the right culture for attracting the best talent. And people now value those things more than ever, and that's a fantastic progress for humanity. I don't expect any of my founders to work more than that. Like I don't work more like that. Why should they?
There you go. So we're talking about like a standard 8, maybe max 10 if you're really pushing, but
Yes.
an 8 you can get reasonable done. All right, there
More
we
than
go.
that,
That
it's non-sustainable in the long run. There are like hidden costs, and their productivity start to fall. You may put this additional 5 hours and get the equivalent productivity of 30 minutes if you were like totally fresh after going to the gym and taking a good shower.
all right, Hernan. There we